We now turn our attention to sloth. I think in many ways, sloth is easily the vice that has been most distorted in our modern world. And fascinatingly, historically, sloth has been considered to be the worst of all the vices, the most destructive, the most dangerous, the most damning of all the vices. So it's fascinating that of all the vices, I think sloth is the most mistaken, the most the vice we're most confused about, the vice we're most mistaken about in the way that we think of it today. Today, we think of sloth as physical laziness, of course. The couch potato is the paradigmatic sloth, but that's not what the traditional account of sloth claims. According to the tradition, sloth is, as I said, maybe the worst of all the vices because sloth may be the most destructive of us. Consider these two quotes from the famous mathematician and philosopher Blaise Pascal. First quote, "I have often said that the sole cause of man's unhappiness is that he does not know how to stay quietly in his room." Interesting. Second quote, "Distraction is the only thing that consoles us from our miseries, and yet it is itself the greatest of our miseries." Think about what Pascal is saying here. He's really getting at the nature, the heart of sloth. Sloth has a tendency to remove me, to direct me towards some other thing, and the other thing will not cure what sloth is attempting to treat. So I use distraction as a way of dealing with my loneliness, as a way of dealing with my sadness, my depression. I try to distract myself in various ways. Maybe I play video games all day long. Maybe I read all day long. Maybe I exercise all day long. Maybe I'm a couch potato, flipping through the TV channels all day long. But notice, doing that actually does nothing to help with my loneliness, with my sadness, with my misery. So the examples I gave, I hope you saw that they were many and varied. Some involved doing lots of stuff. The workaholic may be manifesting sloth as much or more than your typical couch potato. We'll see how that makes sense as we proceed. Now, we can think of sloth in two compatible ways, and I'll talk about them both. There's a kind of general way of thinking about sloth, or you might say this is like a non-religious way. It's not a particularly Christian way, but it's not incompatible. It's perfectly compatible with the Christian way of thinking of sloth. In fact, the Christian way of thinking of sloth is just a species of this more general way. So, two different ways of thinking about sloth. There's the sort of what I'll call the general way, and then there's the, let's call it the Christian, the particular Christian way. In the general sense, sloth is really just this. It's laziness about love. Or putting it more precisely, the person with the vice of sloth sees the demands of love as too burdensome, and so turns away from them. Think about it like this. I want you to take a few moments and write down the ordinary ways in which we grow or nurture our relationships. What should we be doing? What are the normal practices that we should be doing in order to deepen our relationships with others? Write them down. Here's an incomplete list. So I'm not pretending that this list is complete, but here's just some things popped in my head that we should be doing if we want to see our relationships grow and flourish. We need to be communicating with the people that we're in relationships with. Right? We need to talk to our loved ones, and we need to listen to them. And at least some of the time, our communication with our loved ones, with the people we're in relationship with, needs to be about matters that are important. Important to us and important to them. Can't be just superficial stuff in order to deepen, to grow the relationship. We need to spend time with those that we love, with those we're in relationship with, and those that we need, that we want the relationship to grow. Sometimes it's enough for me to simply be in the same car or room with the person that I'm in relationship with. I find this especially true with my wife. We don't have to be talking to one another all the time. Just being in the same room, being in the car together actually counts. That actually enhances our relationship. You don't always have to be talking. Spending time matters. Meals. Meals is a wonderful way, right? Think about it like this. How often do you eat and drink together with other people and you've got your phone out or you're watching television? Right? Now, look, maybe that counts as some of the time stuff, but meals are a perfect, natural, common way of not just being in the same space with the other person, but using that opportunity to learn about each other, to laugh and to cry, to argue, to share. This is a great example. Meals are a great example of doing ordinary activities with those we're in relationship with. Physical contact is another one. It's normal and healthy to touch those that we love, those that we're in some kind of relationship with. Now, we might hug them or kiss them, but we might give them a high five or a fist bump, or pat them on the back, or give them a foot or a shoulder massage. But physical contact is it's important for healthy relationships of all sorts, not just romantic ones. This coming weekend, I'm about to see a close friend of mine, a guy that I grew up with, and him and I haven't seen each other in quite some time. It's been quite a long time. And I anticipate that when we see one another, we're going to touch. Well, we might hug. I doubt we'll just shake hands. Why? Well, because it's been so long. My desire, his desire to be in our each other's presence together, right, has sort of, increased and increased. Our love for one another requires that we move towards spending some time in the same physical space, communicating with one another. And part of our expression of our love for one another, our desire to grow the relationship, will involve some physical contact. And another way of thinking about ways to grow and nurture our relationship is in terms of the help that we give and the help that we receive from others. We need to be there for the persons we care about. They need to know that they care, that they can trust us, that they can ask us for advice, to lend a hand, maybe to lend them some money. And we and they need to be open to correction from one another. That too is a form of help. And listen, and think about it like this. If a relationship cannot withstand critique or rebuke, then that relationship is unhealthy. Or it's just not deep. It's just not deep. So remember, my list, I didn't pretend to be exhaustive, but it should reveal to us that what most of us take to be the most important part of our lives, being in intimate relationships with others, most of us think that that really is the best part of our life, is often not how we actually live. We often settle for superficial relationships and avoid deeper ones. Here's one reason why. Let me give you an example. My wife and I, we take students to India every year. And doing so allows us to form really tight bonds with many of those students. At various points on multiple trips, as we're growing and deepening our relationship with these students, they'll open up to us about their struggles. We often hear from students that they want deep relationships, but they're afraid. They're afraid to be vulnerable to others out of fear that the other person is going to reject them when they find out, maybe some of their deep, dark secrets, things like that. But now think about this for a moment. There's something perverse happening here. They're willing to settle for mediocre relationships because of fear. There's something else worth mentioning, though. I often tell such students, or I often ask these students, if others should be afraid of opening up to them. Should we fear that they will reject us when they learn about who we are, or some of our deep and dirty secrets? And nearly every time the student says, oh, no. No, I will not reject you. They'd never reject us if we're vulnerable with them. Okay, but now notice that this same student is fearful of others rejecting them while saying that they would never reject others. Isn't that interesting? In a perverse sort of way, that student has elevated themselves above others. They are making themselves out to be better than others by assuming that others will reject them, though they would never do the same. This, I think, is a failure of love. They are not treating or thinking of others as they would have others treat or think of themselves. Love is demanding. It requires that we love others as though they are us in every single aspect of our lives. If we want strong and deep relationships, we must be vulnerable. We must engage in those activities that result in intimacy and avoid those that distance us from each other. And sloth tells us, the slothful heart tells us it's not worth it. And so avoids doing what loving relationships require. The result is a loveless, lonely life.